From WABE in Atlanta, this is Savory Stories, a show where we take a look at Atlanta's people through its cuisine and food history.
On this podcast, we trace Atlanta's food story from the past to the present, getting to know Atlanta's culinary creators and demystifying stereotypes about food.
I'm Akilah McConnell, culinary historian and author of A Culinary History of Atlanta and owner of Unexpected Atlanta Tours, TripAdvisor's #1 rated tour company in the city.
I'm Chef Asita Reed, owner of Life Chef, where we help you live a life you love, and author of How to Feed a Kid, a Parent's Guide. Today, we're talking about the big excitement in the restaurant industry, the Michelin stars, and what they mean for Atlanta's restaurants.
If you've ever wondered why exactly a tire company gives out restaurant ratings, or why Atlanta only has one-starred restaurant, or why these stars even matter, today is your day, because on today's episode of Savory Stories, we are breaking down the Michelin stars and Atlanta's winners.
So grab a pen and paper because we're running over a bunch of fabulous restaurants in this episode. Let's get started.
So to start talking about the Michelin Guide, we need to dial it back to 1886. In the year 1886, a brand new invention arrived in Europe, and that was the automobile. 3 years later, in 1889, brothers Andre and Edouard Michelin founded a tire company to supply France's automobile industry. But they had a major issue. There were around only 3,000 cars in the country at the time. So the brothers decided that they needed to increase demand. And in order to do so, they began publishing a small guide that they called the Michelin Guide, which included handy information like how to change a tire, where to get fuel, and ideas for travelers.
Okay, were any of these ideas for travelers based on where people should eat while traveling?
You know, a few, but they weren't really so much focused on food in the early days. Actually, for 2 decades, the Michelin Company produced this information for free until one day, Andre Michelin arrived at a tire shop to see these guides that he was so passionate about being used to prop up a workbench.
Oh.
Yes, so he was pretty disappointed, and starting that day, and based on the principle that man only truly respects what he pays for, they launched a new Michelin Guide in 1920. They sold it for 7 francs, and the new Michelin Guide in the 1920s was also the first to include a list of hotels and restaurants according to specific categories. Now, by 1926, the brothers realized that the restaurant section was becoming increasingly popular, so they hired a team of mystery diners to visit and review restaurants anonymously. In 1926, the Michelin Guide began to award stars to fine dining establishments.
Ooh, the first secret shoppers. That's like my dream job.
Mine as well. Now, one of the important things about Michelin is the anonymity of its inspectors. To this day, Michelin pays for the meals and expenses, and they go to extraordinary lengths to maintain anonymity. Inspectors are never permitted to speak to journalists, and they're advised not to even disclose their line of work, not even to their family.
Mystery and intrigue. Ooh, I love it. It protects the authenticity.
It does. So in 1936, the Michelin Guide created a criteria for starred ranking. And this is actually the exact same system we use today, almost 90 years later. The starred system is this. So first off, you have a 3-star restaurant. A 3-star restaurant, that's the very best that you can get. It offers, and I quote, exceptional cuisine worth a special journey. Below that is a 2-star restaurant. Now, this is one that is, and I quote, excellent cooking worth a detour. And the lowest is a 1-star restaurant, a very good restaurant in its category. And you can see with these rankings, there's a direct tie-in to this idea that you are taking a trip to eat. So a 3-star restaurant might be the purpose of your trip. You might fly up to the city just to eat at that one restaurant. A 1-star restaurant might be one that you eat at if you happen to be in the city. And while we don't know exactly how the inspectors rate the restaurants, there is definitely a slant toward plated and composed dishes and fine dining overall.
Well, I'm glad you broke that down, Akilah, because Michelin star ratings are very different from, say, like Yelp, where you just have people's opinions. And I think people may not fully understand this rating system. So can you tell us more?
Yeah, absolutely. So over the years, Michelin has added on a few more categories. In 2020, Michelin began offering what it called green stars, and this symbolizes excellence in sustainable gastronomy. Now, one of the things that they've also added is they realize that maybe not everybody can afford to spend $400 for a single meal. And so they added on a category called the Bib Gourmand. This highlights restaurants offering exceptionally good food at moderate prices. The last category that they have is the plate. The plate does not have any stars and no special recognition, but the plate restaurants are ones that, and I quote, simply serve good food.
Well, I appreciate how this expands and includes folks' varied definitions of what good food is.
Yeah, and let's talk numbers. In the world, there are only 41 cities or locations that have Michelin guides, which means that these are the only places in which there can be Michelin-starred restaurants. There's 9 United States destinations, and let's just say that Florida is not part of the South because, it's not. Atlanta is the very first city to be included in the Southeast. Now, as you can see, Atlanta being named as a Michelin Guide city is a big deal on its own.
Indeed.
So second, in the United States, there's only 1,509 restaurants which have Michelin rating. Atlanta has 5 one-starred restaurants, 10 Bib Gourmand restaurants, and 30 other restaurants that have received the plate designation. So for these 45 restaurants, that is a really big deal.
Yeah, Akila, I think that's something that a lot of people miss. Just being in a location that has Michelin guides is not common. And to be recognized by Michelin at any level is an honor. So let's take a look at some of Atlanta's awardees, nominees, and considerations.
Love it. I'm excited. Let's go into it.
All right, so congrats, first of all, to the one-star recipients, Atlas, Bacchanalia, Hayakawa, Lazy Betty, and Mujo. I think it's interesting to note that 3 of the 5 top-rated restaurants reflect or have Asian cuisine. It takes me back to our very first episode on City Lights, where we talked about Atlanta's love for Chinese food.
One of the most common misconceptions I hear as a culinary historian focused on Atlanta is this idea that Chinese cuisine in Atlanta is a relatively new concept. We hear a lot about America's historic Chinese communities in places like New York and San Francisco, but not in Atlanta. But the reason that there was an influx of Chinese immigration nationwide in the 1800s also impacted Atlanta. And that reason was, of course, the railroad.
Akila, wasn't Atlanta founded around the railroads?
Yes, it absolutely was.
Ron Su, an Atlanta native, pays homage to his mother at Lazy Betty, and both Hayakawa and Mujo honor Japanese sushi traditions.
I have to tell you, Asada, that Lazy Betty is my top date night choice with my husband. Yes, it's expensive, but it is worth every single penny. And though there are Asian influences, it's not Asian food per se, but rather fine dining with an intermingling of cultures and cuisines. Their signature item is their Southern biscuit, which is like 15 paper-thin layers of biscuit dough drenched in this honey butter. Absolutely mouth-watering delicious. I also love their truffle risotto, especially in the wintertime when they bring in hearty winter truffles to top the dish. Now, they're moving to a larger location in the next few months, and I'm really excited to see what they're going to do because, in my opinion, the only negative about Lazy Betty is that it's in its current location. It feels a bit like a dark cave.
Well, on the opposite spectrum of a cave, we've got Bacchanalia, and I really don't know what to say that hasn't been said before about this restaurant. Could this be Atlanta's crown jewel? Since 1993, Ann Quatrano and Clifford Harris have offered a refined farm-to-table experience. That's 30 years. That could be like 300 years in restaurant years. I'm pretty sure even before they moved to this current location, I celebrated a birthday there on election night where Bill Clinton was voted in as president of the United States. Now, I'm a little fuzzy on the details of that night because there were a lot of courses and a lot of wine, but we had a great time. Their culinary team, led by executive chef Kai Nalampun and pastry chef Carla Tomasco, have been delighting diners with a 5-course prefix menu that is seasonally driven from local providers. Over at Atlas, diners are also guided through courses of seasonal ingredients from local farms. Now, what really stands out here is you can order a la carte, but they do have a chef's tasting menu, and they have a vegetarian and vegan tasting menus.
You know, what you were saying about Bacchanalia, I totally agree. That used to be our top choice for a fancy night out until Lazy Betty supplanted it. But I still love Bacchanalia. Back in the day, it was the very first place that I ever had a molten chocolate lava cake. They used to serve it with this fresh mint ice cream. That was back in 99, I think, or 2000. I think it was, no. It must have been 2002. And at the time, nobody had this.
Right.
And I remember putting my spoon in there, and I was like, what is this? This is gushing chocolate. It's amazing. So anyway, it was so good. Have you had their SF egg?
I have not.
Oh, my God.
Why is it called? Oh, first. Okay.
For their Summerlin Farms. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think they've had it on the, that's like the
One of their signatures.
That's the one consistent dish they've had for like 30 years or something like that. So, and the other interesting feature about Bacchanalia with respect to the Michelin stars is that in addition to receiving a 1-star rating, it also received the Green Star rating because of their commitment to sustainability.
All right, let's go into the Bib Gourmands. I am a passionate lover of a good sandwich, and Fred's Meat and Bread might have my favorite Italian grinder in the ATL, and my husband loves their burgers. 2 Black-owned restaurants that received the Big Gourmand include Bomb Biscuits and Atlanta legend Busy Bee, which we have also discussed in previous episodes on City Lights.
Another favorite choice, and my kids' favorite choice, is actually Arepa Mia.
Mm-hmm.
We're over there all the time. You'll find us like that's their spot. Their arepas are amazing. Their tajadas con nata, or their sweet plantains, their plantain chips, all of it is so delicious. We also really love Antico Pizza Napolitano for its Neapolitan pizzas, and we've discussed them on a previous episode. So it's really wonderful to see both of these restaurants receive the Bib Gourmand designation.
Yep. And as far as the restaurants that received the plated mention, I'm excited to see some of my favorites here, like Homegrown. By far my favorite breakfast in the city. I go there for the breakfast enchiladas with sunny side up eggs and a side of their fried green tomatoes. They've got this table sauce there that goes with those fried green tomatoes that will have you coming back. Del Bar is a gorgeous internal space. This is a great place to go with a small group so you can taste and share plates.
And make sure you order the rice dishes because
Absolutely.
Rice is such a huge important part of Persian cuisine, and their rice dishes are just amazing.
Everything, even their cocktails, even their mocktails. Del Bar, just well done. And I know people who swear by the brunch. Haven't made it there for that yet, but I'm going back. Lanzhou Ramen. These are hand-pulled ramen noodles. You can watch them make them from the huge window into the kitchen, and they're just slapping the noodle dough until it gets bigger and bigger. The bowls are gigantic, like you could dive in and swim. This is ramen for people who really love fresh noodles, and I love their cold plates too. I always get the spicy pig ears and the tofu skin to go because it's more than I can eat there, and I just have it for later.
Yeah, and it's just so fun to go there and just watch them make those noodles too.
The kids love it. And Xi'an Gourmet House near Georgia Tech. Okay, the menu's great, the dumplings are fine, and you get a lot of them. Not mad at any of that, but you must, Akila, order the cumin lamb noodles. Thank me later. These are handmade noodles. They're the wide, flat, chewy kind. They come out screaming hot with tender lamb and this amazing broth that you just want to steam your face over. They are spicy. Your nose will run. They are deeply flavored with the toasted cumin, and handmade noodles are just every noodle lover's dream. It's a bowl you want to swim in.
You've convinced me. I've got to make it down there.
Absolutely. And let's hear from you. What are some of your favorites that got some mentions?
Well, if you've ever stated that you hate okra or you know somebody who hates okra, please try those thin, crispy okra fries at Chai Pani. So delicious. They turn any okra hater into an okra lover.
Absolutely.
We talked about the amazing New York-style bagels and sandwiches at the General Muir before, but I was personally so happy to see a shout-out to my very favorite pasta in the city, Bocalupa's 20-yolk tagliatelle with mushrooms and Tuscan kale kimchi. They make that pasta right there. It is impossible to get reservations. I wish that I could eat there every week. But it is just so good. And there are some of my regular haunts. I'm there all the time.
Yeah, 20-yolk tagliatelle, that's ridiculous.
So another shout out has to be to Food Terminal. Their food is amazing. My kids love it because they have a robot that will bring you your food, which is very, very fun. But it's actually the food for me. Their garlic noodles are just incredible, super garlicky. You won't want to be kissing anybody after them, but so delicious. And then I'm just also a huge fan of their mango tofu or their mango chicken, which is made, I think, with green mango and really spicy sauce. Absolutely delicious.
Over the past few years, especially through the pandemic, I've watched some of these restaurants pivot and thrive. Some of them started out as simple pop-ups. So I feel a bit of pride seeing restaurants like Kamayan, Chai Pani, which we've discussed in another episode on City Lights, Little Bear over in Summerhill definitely scrapped their way through the pandemic. So I'm happy to see them getting recognition, and Snack Box Bistro. They've all made the recommended list. Atlanta really does show up as an international city when you look at these restaurants, and I hope they continue to thrive as the Michelin Guide recognizes the amazing food we have here.
Thank you all for joining Savory Stories. Please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you do that kind of thing with your favorite podcasts.
And we'll be back in a few weeks with a new episode. See you then.
Savory Stories is produced by Crystal Devone and Kevin Rinker, with additional production and editing from Scotty Crow. The series was created by Summer Evans and premiered on City Lights with Lois Reitzes. For more information, visit wabe.org/savory stories.